So in this next piece, I'm going to show you how to get a histogram, again, on a graphing calculator. So if I go to my stat editor and I input some data, I currently have some in here, then I can go to second y equals, which is my stat plot. And if you notice here, this is a troubleshooting tip. Only this first one is on, but it currently tells me what style I'm graphing. This is a histogram, what list is being graphed, and the frequency for the data values. So I want each of those data values graphed once. And notice this one is on where these are off. Sometimes students will have problems getting their calculator to graph if there's more than one graph turned on, or even if there's something in just plain y equals. Always have the kids go to y equals and clear out whatever they have in there. Also, when they go back to graphing y equals, they'll have a problem graphing what's in y equals if any of these plots are on, and I can currently tell that plot 1 is on. So when they're in their y equals and having a hard time graphing and can't figure out why it won't graph, just take a look and see if any of their plots are on. Quick way to turn that off is to go up on top of it, hit enter, and then when I go back down, it's off. But I currently want it to be on. I'm going to go back to second y equals. And so I'm going to choose the first one. I do want it to be on. This time I want to choose the histogram type, which is number 3. So I'll hit enter. And then my data is in list 1, and I do want the frequency to be 1. Again, a quick way to have the calculator set up the graph for you is to hit zoom and the number 9, which is that zoom stat. So this will give you a beginning picture to work with, but I always tell students to make sure they know what is going on in this graph. And a way to do that is to hit trace. So now if you notice, this first bin goes from 5 to anything less than 12. Now I'm not graphing decimal numbers, but if I were, 11.9999 would actually be in this bar. This next bar starts with the number 12, and it appears as though I'm counting by sevens, so I would expect this bar to start at 19, and I can see that as I move across. So you notice, starts with 12, ends just before 19, which means this next bar starts the 19s. So I can tell the scale that it's using counting by sevens. I can also tell how many are actually in here. Notice there's no axis over here to tell me how high these are, but this bar is 3 high, and it tells me that right here with my n value. And then as I scroll across, I notice that this one has 2 data values in it, which means this one over here would have 1 data value in it. Now, rule of thumb, they must have at least 5 bars, but if they would like to have more and see what it looks like, they'll need to go to their window. So I'm going to press window. And oh, here I can see I'm counting by sevens. So I want to make sure that I take in the lowest value of my data set, and I want to exceed the highest value at least by a little bit. My highest value is 33, so certainly 40 exceeds it, but maybe I don't want to count by sevens. Maybe I would like to count by 5s. And my y value, my y max is currently set at 3.5. Seems like a silly number since it's a quantity, so let's say I set it at 4 since it didn't seem like I was exceeding 4, but I might this time, I don't know. And frequently I'll actually make the y minimum be a negative number, and I'll show you the difference. So if I go back to the graph, you'll notice that this line got a little bit lower. As a matter of fact, if I change that y minimum to be 0, notice it gets lower yet. So here's what happens when I hit trace. It falls on top of the grid or the graph, and I don't like that. So I like to leave a little bit of space at the bottom. So maybe I'll set my y minimum to be -2, look at the graph, hit trace. Oh, I've got plenty of room. I probably could have even made it just be -1. But now notice how the shape of the graph has changed now that I'm counting by 5s. I do have more bars. It's honestly looking a little bit more uniform. So I'm not sure if I actually like this one or not. Maybe I'll count by 3s. That's very uniform. So you can see how you can change what your data looks like based off of what you're counting by. So maybe I would like to count by 6s. Again, very uniform. So that those 7s, that counting by 7 actually wasn't all that bad. So that's how I graph with a histogram. I could at the same time turn on the second plot. So notice number 1 is on, as I stated before, and number 2 is off. I'm going to choose number 2 and turn it on. And let's say on this one, I'd like to do a box plot. So I'm going to choose the box plot. And my data is still in list 1. And now when I hit graph, it's going to superimpose them on top of each other. The way I can get them to not be on top of each other is to change this Y minimum, so I'll create some space between them. And I may even want to go so that my Y minimum is 0, and I'll make them a little bit farther apart as I do that. Again, the compromise is now when I hit trace, it's going to fall on top of the histogram. Notice when I have the two together that in the upper left-hand corner, it tells me which one I'm currently tracing. So I'm currently tracing plot 1, which means it's going to go through the histogram. If I hit the down arrow, watch what happens in that upper left-hand corner. So now I'm graphing plot 2. Plot 2 is my box plot, and look where the cursor is now. So now it's showing me that minimum on my box plot, followed by Q1, the median, Q3, and the max. And if I want to get back to plot 1, I can hit the down arrow again and notice it's changed and I'm back on top of the histogram. So that's a great way to toggle back and forth between the two graphs.